So in this video, I am going to be exploring and exposing some subtle energy harvesting dynamics that we were taught to be normal forms of social exchange when they are anything but. Okay, so I have a list of 11 very specific, subtle energy harvesting techniques that are often used in order to usurp someone in their energetic sovereignty. We're going to be going into each and every one of them. And the underlying theme for this video is the reminder that people are here to rise with us, not to hang on to our coattails. Okay, so there's no real rising into your power if other people are clinging to you. There's no real rising into their own power if they refuse to let go. And this is something that it's so interesting because, the themes around this have been coming up into my awareness over the past couple of days, weeks. We are clearly into Aries season. We're still in the first decan of Aries at the time of recording. And Aries is the sign through which we reclaim our sovereignty. We reclaim our I am truth. We reclaim the right to author ourselves and our own timelines in accordance with our source code and our blueprint. And as such, Aries is the energy that is very, very invested in our seeing every way that we're not doing that, so that we can correct, we can self-correct. And indeed, Aries works with Pisces in doing this also, because Pisces begins to show us like a lot of the undercurrent energies where we're being pulled at and we're being pulled away from self and we're being pulled in more group and collective stories as opposed to holding ourselves in our source code. And if we're able through the Piscean energy to see that and to take responsibility, then through Aries, we rise. We rise back into who we actually are supposed to be and into our true timelines that match that code and frequency. So I'm going to read something. I actually began this as I was writing. I'm a writer also, as many of you know. I was going to write this and put it on the community board later today or tomorrow. But as I began to write it, I just felt like this is really something I need to talk about. I need to talk about it. I need to break it down. This needs to be thorough. And it needs to be thorough because of where we are in Ascension and how important this is for so many of you, so many of us at this juncture. Now, you might have been noticing that you're becoming more sensitive, right? You're becoming more sensitive to certain things that you weren't sensitive to before. And a lot of that has to do with coming back into the wholeness of self. As you come back into the wholeness of self, the things that once upon a time your system was taught to bypass or accept as being a part of you or your own, those things don't only become louder, but the cost that your system pays for those things to continue to exist in your reclaimed resonance or at this stage of your journey, it becomes more expensive. What does that mean? That means that, well, in one way, a positive way, these things become clearer for you to see, where you couldn't see the dynamics, the mechanics, the underlying energies. It becomes a lot clearer, for one thing. And that's to enable the ability for you to correct faster. What also becomes more obvious are the cycles. The cycles tend to occur faster. So what may have taken you decades, well, let's start here. What may have taken you lifetimes, decades, years, months, weeks, days to see previously, you're now seeing sometimes in a matter of minutes. You're now going through the cycle a lot faster so you can see the full mechanics of it and you can opt out, right? So the reason for this is because the frequency of the earth is changing. It's getting higher. We're lining higher into our golden age resonance. And at every level of upgrade or moving higher, we are required to rise higher into the truth of who we are. So a lot of the time, what this is going to look like also, or it's going to feel like, or let's put it this way, what it's going to bring forth in other people or other beings who might not yet be at the level you are, is it's going to make you appear to be more nitpicky, possibly, or invested in the details of things they think are insignificant. Now, just because they think it's nitpicky or insignificant doesn't make you wrong, and it doesn't make them wrong either. It just means that you're at different phases and different stages, and you're here to own your phase and own your stage, regardless as to what other people are able to see or not. And later on, if they're continuing on a true healing path, they too will get to that point where they begin to actually recognize where you are now. And we've all done that, right? We've all judged people thinking that they were something, doing something that later on it made sense to us because we weren't in the same resonance. Okay, so I began this as a written piece. I'm going to read it because many of you have said to me before, you resonate also more when I come on and I talk as opposed to just writing. And I get that. Sometimes it's easier to digest things through hearing, through audio, and through visual. Okay, so I'm going to read this and I'm going to get into my notes. I have a lot of notes. We're going to be here for a minute. We're going to get into this. We're going to really break it down tonight. So you might want to watch this video in pieces. You might want to make the decision to settle down into whatever you're doing if you want to listen to it in its wholeness. But I'm going to take my time and give this subject the justice it deserves because it's important for so many, and it might not be the larger collective, but it's still a really important message because for those beings who are resonating with this, you're setting the tone for others who are also going to be able to come along and into this faster so that this whole golden age timeline thing can really get rolling on the earth as the standard instead of the exception. Okay, so here we go. People who don't truly value your life force, your spirit, and your source code are often the loudest when you enforce boundaries to protect what they want access to freely. What they are actually showing you is that they were benefiting from an exchange that wasn't equal. The angry or argumentative outburst in response is them displaying the withdrawal symptoms from being cut off definitively. When you enforce a boundary or say no to protect your value, and the other person or entity involved tries to then pull you down, devalue you, badmouth you, or argue with you, they are doing so for a reason. Don't get embroiled in the emotionality of it all, but do pay close attention to what is playing out energetically. It often goes like this. All is seemingly well in the exchange for as long as you are doing what they want you to do. They will be complimentary and often will do their best to overemphasize any similarities or likenesses you share. This has less to do with true resonance and more to do with forcing the perception of intimacy. You may begin noticing that something is out of place. If, like me, your gift is tracking cycles and their behaviors, then you will likely begin picking up on patterning. One of the best ways to track energy is to not pay attention to what people are saying or doing, but to pay attention to the fruit or cycles and patterns it is producing in your reality, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Once you see the pattern and enforce a boundary to stop it or protect yourself, that person will either become hostile or try to manipulate their way back past your boundary. Both behaviors show that they are likely gaining something from the exchange, even if it is depleting you, and even if they are doing so unconsciously. If this dynamic of distorted energy exchange occurs between beings who are frequently aligned, there will be awareness, respect, and correction. That correction sometimes comes by way of rearranging the dynamics of the exchange to bring it back into symbiosis, or by way of disconnection. Either way, it is honored by both in the protection of source code and in taking responsibility for their own energy and creational output. And this is what it means to walk truly in sovereignty, to take responsibility for your exchanges and cycles so that they are up to source code. This is how we protect ourselves and one another from further energy harvesting. The truth is, it takes two, at least two, to give to a cycle. In our sovereignty, we don't only look to how we are being victimized to make others the victim in an endless cycle of pointing the finger. Instead, we look for where we have power. And the only power we ever have is over self. So we look for what role we are playing in keeping the cycle open, and then do what we can in our own authority to end it. Beings still benefiting from harvesting others, even unconsciously so, will always seek to get away from what is actually occurring in the exchange. This is so they can continue to blindly take and also try to keep others embroiled in the dysfunction with them. And again, this is oftentimes unconscious and due to programming, but it is still dangerous in what it perpetuates. In enforcing the boundaries that are necessary to protect our source code, not our wounded egos, we must become comfortable with others casting us into the role of the villain. But you should also know that this only really happens with people who prefer victimhood timelines over personal responsibility. And I don't say that lightly, because we all have been genuinely victimized and harmed by the false matrix and her upholders. However, some find continual comfort in wearing their victimhood stories as identity and are not yet ready to shed those timelines completely. They might still be processing a lot of the junk that contributed to their being continually harmed, and they need the time to continue to do so, which should be honored and respected. However, some hang on to being the victim as a form of energy harvesting, and that needs to be exposed for what it is too. And we're going to get into that tonight. This is because it is the latter who will use guilt to try and get you to remove your boundaries so that they can feed off of your compassion and empathy. They will try to make you out to be stronger than them, and so that they also have a greater need than you. They will try to speak on your duty to them in their humanity to also get you to acquiesce to their demands. Some will use flattery to cast you in the position of being higher than them, to pedestalize you. This is so you feel compelled to act in their favor. And because you know what it is to be repeatedly victimized and harmed, you remove your boundary to help them. And time will pass, and then the real fruit of the exchange and what was actually going on in the energy will begin to show. Some of the subtlest energy harvesting dynamics feed on our kindness, our moral code, and our desire to see others rise with us. We would do well to remember that people are here to rise with us, not by hanging on to our coattails. Okay, so let's get into breaking down that a little bit more. Okay, I have a lot of notes. Before I get into this, I want to make one salient point that applies to anything seeking to enter your energy for the purpose of shifting you into a different timeline. And this is whether it's shifting you into a timeline that you perceive as being better or worse. And that is that every timeline shift will challenge where you are with your own perception of self. Every timeline shift, especially big ones, will always challenge your own perception of self. So with higher timeline activations and activators, they will do this for the purpose of helping you shed your false programming, false personas, and the timelines that you became accustomed to in the false matrix. In energy harvesting exchanges, or those seeking to deactivate and pull you into lower timelines, they will do this by way of getting you to doubt your power, your protections, and the necessity for the boundaries that protect you. So one protects and enforces your source code and organic timeline creation, and the other protects and enforces what keeps you being food to the false matrix. Okay, so like I said, both will challenge your perception of self. So a person who is working to help you activate yourself into a higher timeline, they will, and you know, they're doing it in alignment with the truth of who you are in an empowering way. They will activate you by getting you to question the lies you've believed about yourself that have kept you in a lower reality. Beings who seek to pull you into a lower timeline, whether consciously or not, they also will get you to question, but they will get you to doubt the validity of who you are in your power, so that you stay in the original phase and timeline. The most effective and subtle forms of energy harvesting and siphoning rarely look like attack first. They look like need, admiration, confusion, resonance, vulnerability, urgency, and even apparent innocence. It is also important to note that these dynamics, they steal from both parties, even those who seemingly enter higher timelines because of harvesting others. So I want to be clear about that, because by sharing this with you, I'm not doing it to once again create a bigger schism or a bigger issue between pointing the finger at some people and making some people villains, and we're the victims and we're the hashtag chosen ones who can do no wrong. That's not how it works. If you listen to this list and you don't hear from this list how you have also acted in these behaviors at some point in your life too, even if it was unconscious at the time, then I question whether you are fully aware of how you've given to your own cycles of energy harvesting, and also to the cycles where unconsciously you've contributed to the energy harvesting of others. And that's something that many people don't like to face, because it's easier to hide behind the mask of being chosen ones and being this and being that and all the titles and the labels we like to say that we are. But the truth of the matter is that we were all a part of the false matrix, and we were all giving to these dynamics unconsciously. We weren't doing it because we wanted to steal from people, but we were all programmed to do that. Now, I'm never going to deny that some of us were the ones that were set up to be stolen from the most. That is true. But there are a myriad of ways we learned how to manipulate ourselves and others for the purpose of survival. And these are the things that need to be really uncovered and exposed, not because we're bad people, not even because some of these people are bad, but just because this is what continues the dynamics of inequality. This is what continues the dynamics of harvesting, subtle harvesting, right? So we're going to get into 11 techniques that I have today I spent a good part of my day really thinking about this, conversing with ChatGPT to really begin to organize this into sections so it becomes more cohesive, right? So these are some of the labels I've come up with for these things. Now, you may have heard these with different titles, different labels, especially if you are also schooled in psychology, narcissistic abuse, scapegoating dynamics, family abuse. They have different names also. But this is how I'm breaking it down. Excuse me. Sorry, I just hit on the mic. My fucking voice. My voice. Okay, so the first technique I want to take a look at is forced intimacy. So this is when someone tries to create a sense of closeness or familiarity that is not forged from anything real. So it's not through the time you've spent together, not through the consistency that comes from building a relationship, not from any form of mutuality, not from any form of mutuality or co-creation of clean cycles together, just kind of pulling it out of the air and hoping it sticks. They may mirror you for the purpose of building this false intimacy. They may mirror your language, your values, your stances, your wounds, your insights, your likes and dislikes, or your sense of purpose in order to cloud or collapse your natural discernment. It is a design to manifest a feeling of shared resonance and frequency for accelerated access. It can look and feel loving, spiritual, emotionally honest, or deeply affirming. But the main aim is to move past natural boundaries by manufacturing familiarity, also known as finessing. Okay? Alrighty, number 2, resonance mimicry. So this is kind of an extension of forced intimacy, and oftentimes they work closely together, or they could even be identified as being one and the same, right? Depending on, how you are experiencing it and processing it. But this is where the person does not only rush closeness, but they also go a step further and they perform alignment. So this is where they echo your principles, your ethics, your mission, your frequency, and your pain points in a way that makes you interpret them as a genuine match. Genuine resonance creates coherence, clarity, and clean exchange. I'm going to keep on coming back to that phrase, clean exchange. Mimicked resonance often creates fog, overextension or overextending yourself, confusion, depletion, and a subtle pressure to keep proving in the connection and proving yourself. It borrows the appearance of compatibility while bypassing the actual substance of it. Okay, number 3, need-based hooking. Okay, this is where access is gained through the activation of your compassion, your conscience, or your shared history. So this is where false loyalty binds come in. The person may not be consciously manipulative, but the dynamic was formed and exists around the unspoken demand that you regulate, carry, reassure, stabilize, interpret, uplift, or save. The harvesting happens because your life force becomes the hidden resource underwriting their function, oftentimes emotionally. They begin to lean on your clarity instead of building their own. Your steadiness becomes the environment in which they seek stability, while you and your system slowly pays the cost for that leakage. Number 4, moral coercion. This happens when your goodness is used against you, and it is very subtle. The dynamic quietly frames boundarylessness and self-sacrifice as kindness, access as compassion, and self-abandonment as virtue. If you say no, you are made to feel harsh, selfish, unkind, inhumane, unhealed, ungenerous, or arrogant, or superior. It is effective because it recruits you into policing your own boundary, as the person does not need to overpower you directly. They just need to get your moral code, which they're exploiting, to do it for them through you. Number 5, and in close relation to moral coercion, is guilt extraction. And why is it in close relation? Well, because oftentimes you'll find that people who are giving the most to these kinds of power plays in relational dynamics are still very much ensconced in religious templating and false matrix moral coding. Okay, so a lot of the time you're dealing with religious templating, you're dealing with religious entities. Okay? In close relation is guilt extraction. This is when someone invokes suffering, fragility, disadvantage, pain, confusion, abandonment, or prior harm and tales of their past victimhood to override your true discernment. Their pain is also likely real, which is what makes this dynamic so subtle. The issue here is not whether suffering exists, but whether it is being weaponized or used to secure access that has not been rightly given. When guilt is overly active in your field, you stop asking whether the exchange is clean. You stop asking yourself, you stop surveying the exchange and the energy for danger, and you start looking at yourself. And that's the point, right? And then what that leads into is you start to unconsciously bargain with just how much you are willing to betray yourself in order to avoid feeling like you're the bad one or another villain in their long list of offenders. My voice. It is important to note, I feel like I should say that again. I feel like there was scrambling and confusion that was coming through, and I don't consent to that shit. So I want to restate that when guilt is overly active in your field, it causes you to stop questioning the exchange and the underlying energy, and it causes you to start looking at yourself and questioning if you're being fair. And oftentimes, because of the way many of us have been programmed, especially through scapegoating culture and entrainment in family abuse dynamics, we are always taught to put others before us and to see ourselves in the light of being bad or being something we're not. And so when beings come in with this kind of trying to override us by making us feel bad for them and their circumstances, it's only natural that we revert back into, that original programming that got us to question whether we were being good or we were being accommodating enough. And that's the point. It's to avoid feeling like you're bad or like you're in the wrong, and to also, again, avoid being a villain in their reality, especially because you've been told that they have a long list of offenders and offenses. You don't want to be another one on that list, right? So it's important to note, though, right, that the guilt is being projected onto you by them. It's connected to your personal wounds. That's what it connects to. The guilt that they're projecting then connects to your personal wounds and the programs you have yet to fully recognize and therefore clear, which is why the guilt will feel like your own, even though it's a projection. Number 6, flattery positioning, or using flattery to manipulate. This is when admiration is used to place you into a role in someone else's reality or script you did not choose or author for yourself. They may ascribe titles and labels to you, such as being the wise one, the strong one, the one who can handle or hold more, the one who should understand, the one who should rise above, or the one who can help me. On the surface, it sounds elevating, but underneath it can be deeply manipulative because it relieves the other person of responsibility while making you feel subtly and covertly obligated to perform in accordance with the role they've assigned you in their false script. And here I feel like I need to remind you that anytime you are called to act against yourself and your source code, you are opening your field to things and resonances that shouldn't enter. And you are also opening yourself to therefore experience lower timelines. This is how important it is. I wrote about this, on the community board earlier today. That's why in the false matrix, they wanted us. They wanted all of us in social and intimate connections where we were out of alignment with the beings frequentially, but that was covered up through emotional resonance or shared interest or shared gripes. Because what that does is it causes all of us to be in the wrong timelines. Every person in that group and dynamic will be in a timeline that is discordant to the truth of who they are. And in some cases, I know it seems like they have it better than you, because a lot of the time, those of you who are in resonance with my work, you have been the scapegoats in those groups. The one who was consistently taken from and made to hold other people's shit while they were able to elevate by stealing from you and not taking responsibility for their own stuff. But even those beings, in being misaligned and in stabilizing for themselves through your energy, higher timelines and experiences on the planet, they also are in disarray. Because what it means is that they cannot learn the soul lessons that they need to learn to properly evolve into their next cycle. And so when the false matrix, when they die, for example, over time, they keep on losing more and more of their own souls and their ability to be able to ascend. So while in our temporal experiences, it seems unfair, and it's unfair and it's wrong, everyone is being pulled out of alignment for the purpose of being a battery and to be taken away from their soul's evolution and from source. Crisis cycling. This is where the exchange is formed from and repeatedly returns to some form of urgency, instability, fallout, or emergency to keep you engaged and beholden to them. The person or group may promise or perform change, awareness, growth, or correction, and may even mean it in some moments, but the fruit of the cycle remains the same. Their instability, or the instability born from your connection, becomes the portal through which your energy is constantly recruited. You are therefore kept in response mode rather than in your true source code creation. The harvesting lies not just in the emotional intensity, but in how it keeps your field oriented around maintenance and survival rather than expansion. And note, I said not just their instability, but the instability that is formed from your connection. Because again, I want to emphasize, this isn't about us being good and them being bad, or us being bad and them being good. This is about energetic incompatibility and what occurs when we try to push things to align that aren't in frequential alignment through forms of, manipulation, loyalty, binding, staying longer, being convinced to do something because someone else needs us to, or because we don't want them to feel bad, or we don't want to feel bad by not doing it. All of those things are all things we've learned. We've been programmed into believing are like our conscience. Some things are our conscience. I don't want to, completely, over like bypass that truth, right? But your conscience is designed in source code to respond to things in lower emotional resonances that put you out of alignment with your truth. What do I mean by that? You are supposed to be ashamed when you do certain things. You're not supposed to live in shame, though, because to live in shame means to live apart from your truth and apart from source. Having shame triggered because you've done something wrong, it's always designed to help you see so that you can then rise back into your truth. And as a source encoded being, your baseline truth should be love. The baseline of your timelines, all your creations, your relationship to yourself, to others, and the earth should be love. You shouldn't be giving your energy to dynamics that are rooted in your shame or in your guilt or in your fear, because that promotes lower timelines that take you away from your source code, because you were created to build, to co-create, and to expand from the baseline of love. Those lower emotional resonances are corrective. They're not what you're here to build from. And so any dynamic or connection that keeps you in those lower resonances and therefore keeps you creating realities and timelines from those lower resonances are not a frequential match for you. They might not be a frequential match for you ever, but they're definitely not a frequential match for as long as that is what you're cycling through with them. Okay, so again, this is where we talk so much about sovereignty, and it's such a buzzword to be a sovereign being. But sovereignty isn't just being free from the false matrix, because the truth of the matter is you can't be free from the false matrix if you're not aware of all of the hooks and the tethers whereby your natural responses and mechanisms are still covertly rooted in those false matrix templates. To be sovereign is to know who you are in your source code and to fully honor that above all things, because in honoring that, you are honoring all things. You can't truly honor anything outside of yourself if you're not first honoring self in your source code. And that's where they got us out of alignment. And that's where all of these subtle energy harvesting dynamics, excuse me, this is where they target us. They try to get us subtly out of our allegiance to self and our source code, a lot of the time through false moral codes that have been designed to program us into submitting to external energies and authorities over self. And because that is social code, familial code, it feels more familiar than being true to self. And indeed, in the false matrix, they also policed you by telling you that when you're true to self, to the degree that you need to be to recover and protect your own source code, that there's a problem with that. And oftentimes there were punitive effects for that. There was backlash that was brought into your field for doing that, to purposely put you back into false matrix order and looping. And you were used to do that against yourself, others were used to do that against you, and you were used to do that against others too. Because the truth of the matter is that once again, it takes at least two to give to a cycle. So if we are a part of a cycle, whether with another person or a group or a system, however we're involved, at some point, if we don't recognize that we're giving to the cycle and remove ourselves, then we are fully complicit and we're consenting. Especially in these energies where we have the ability to see the truth as never before. Before, the false matrix really made it like near impossible for us to see through all of the densities that had us tangled up. Not anymore. The only reason we're not able to see the truth at this stage of ascension is either because we don't want to, or because it's not part of our contract, because not everyone is here to actually ascend all the way into golden age timelines. You know, those are really the only real reasons, because it's available to everyone, especially anyone who is source coded to go forth. It's available to us all, but it requires a level of self-inventory and radical honesty about all the things we've been told we should be ashamed of, and so naturally we want to push away. But that's what keeps us being energy harvested, and that's what keeps us unconsciously giving to energy harvesting dynamics that keeps these things going on the earth. Okay, number 6, confusion generation. So not all harvesting comes through drama, but all comes through the blurring of lines, intentions, and boundaries. Confusion is born through this blurriness, both energetically and consciously. And so subtle inconsistency, mixed signals, vagueness, contradiction, implication, spiritualized ambiguity, which is a big one, or chronic non-clarity, all produce confusion. In the event of this, you may leave the exchange thinking more than you should have to. You might constantly replay, you might interpret and second guess. In other words, you spend energy trying to resolve what should have been simple. This is important to recognize because confusion itself is a drain when it's prolonged, because it wrongfully consumes your attention, and attention is life force. It's also important to note, though, that timeline jumping sometimes involves the blurring of boundaries and some confusion. But that is the adjustment and integration for you to go higher, not fall backwards. It should resolve itself as you become clear in who you are. I can't read my own writing. Okay, so it should resolve itself as you become clear in who you are and reject what the old timeline and persona needed you to be. So in this way, energy harvesting attempts can be alchemized into timeline jumps. Because where other beings come to bring confusion and blurriness into your field, and you choose to anchor into the truth of your identity and your power and reject their confusion, it actually gives you an opportunity to move into a higher timeline through that too, right? So that's what I mean when I say that timeline jumping in itself, especially when you're timeline jumping from one reality and it's a huge timeline jump, it will cause confusion initially. That's what the Tower card is. And that's because all of the boundaries and binds that kept you locked into the original timeline are going to come down for you to see your way into the newer timeline. But in order to secure your spot in the newer timeline, you have to be able to override all that's collapsing that wants to convince you it's the end all and be all, when really it's the clearance. So when people come in to your field and bring confusion through trying to push past your boundaries, they are opening the door to a collapse that you can drive into something higher for yourself if you know who you are and you know who they aren't. And what I mean when I say you know who they aren't, I'm not being funny here. Literally, beings who enter into your field trying to collapse you in your own domain, which is self, they don't know who they are if they're doing that. Because if they knew who they were in their source code, they would adhere to it and not feel the need to try to usurp upon someone else's reality. Number 7, this is how you can tell source encoded beings who are moving in that code versus beings who are still moving with false matrix agendas. People who overwrite your boundaries or try to push past your boundaries are often people who don't respect your value and your right to be author over your own field and reality. And it might be unconscious because of programming, but it doesn't shift where that energy is coming from. It's not their source code. It's the programming that is rooted in false matrix templates. Number 7, intermittent reinforcement. This is a tricky one, okay? So this is when the exchange is just enough, quote unquote, to keep you invested. It's just good enough, just warm enough, just exciting enough, just connected enough. And it's a form of settling, okay? The person gives you enough to sustain false hope in things maybe getting better oftentimes, but not enough to establish true reciprocity, safety, or real compatibility and resonance. This is also a form of future faking, even though it's subtle, right? Because it creates a loop of anticipation and reward that can be incredibly binding. It's very Pavlovian in nature, right? You keep returning and staying, not because the exchange is whole and growing you in your value, but because it gives the appearance of becoming whole someday, or getting better someday, or having potential. And that appearance of becoming better or having more potential, it will always arrive just when you reach certain thresholds where you can take no more. And so when it comes in, it then appears to almost be like a breakthrough. But it's not a breakthrough. It's actually the end of the loop. And the loop is pulling you back in with the same energy that pulled you in to begin with and keeps you looping. And that energy that pulled you in to begin with was the promise of improvement. And when you get to the end of your tether, literally, and you think that you shouldn't go on, all of a sudden, the promise again of things being better enters the program, and things might shift slightly and temporarily, only to pull you and oftentimes deeper into the loop. Many of you, especially those of you who survived any form of domestic violence, you know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about. This is exactly the same energy, but expressed subtly and coercively without, physical violence or overt emotional and mental violence, but there's still a lot of covert emotional and mental manipulation at play, which is why it's so subtle and makes it appear harmless. And you guys know that every time you get pulled deeper into a loop, the energetic commitment becomes grander. So you get hooked even deeper. It gets harder to escape every time, the more that you become ensconced in it. Number 8, identity baiting. This is when someone secures or maintains access by appealing to who you are or who you believe yourself to be. Whether, you consider yourself to be a healer, a helper, a truth teller, a leader, a compassionate person, a mother, a protector, a bridge builder, sovereign, or a source encoded being. They may or may not say it directly, but the exchange quietly and covertly challenges you to prove the validity of your identity through your continual availability. So I'll say that again because I hiccuped. Well, not literally hiccuped, energetically. They may or may not say it directly, but the exchange quietly and covertly challenges you to prove the validity of your identity through continual availability. The trap is that you begin acting from the need to remain consistent with an image of yourself rather than your present grounded truth. This is where you start to move in ways where in the relationship, you have to prove yourself. Because on the one hand, they pretend to recognize you, but then they start to draw you into scenarios very subtly designed to get you to question if you really are who you think you are and even who they say you are. It's a covert way to pull you into self-doubt that then initiates this need to prove yourself, not even always to them, but to yourself. This is where it becomes dangerous because it can look like shadow work. It can look like shadow work, but it's not. Every energy harvesting scenario and dynamic is designed, I think I already said this, it's designed to pull you out of yourself. It's designed to pull you out of your power. It's designed to open you up so something else has access to you. And I will often say this, I've been saying this, for years. Your biggest form of protection, people come to me oftentimes, how do I get protected, Solarah, blah, blah, blah. And I always say this to them. We can do all manner of things, to protect our energy. And I don't tell you not to, because in this day and age where walls and boundaries are all crumbling down and people don't know who the fuck they are, this usurping into other people's energy and space, it's higher than ever. So I will never say don't use ritual or decrees and all that other stuff as enforcements, but I will always say the true magic comes from you. So what you apply to ritual, what you apply to a decree, if it's not rooted in the truth of who you know yourself to be, it's not going to be as strong. Because the ultimate protection you have is by not departing from yourself. The more that you anchor into the truth of who you are and your source code, the more that you are protected. And this is why and this is why I was talking about before, the more you are rising into your truth, the more important it becomes to ensure you stay in that and go higher through administering the proper boundaries needed to protect that. And this is exactly why, like I said at the beginning, as you rise, you become more sensitive to things that once upon a time you would bypass or you would let bypass. But you can't at a certain level because you're beginning to see and learn how those things are contributing to your own dysfunction and discordance in your own system. And when you become aware, it becomes more dangerous. The price you pay in awareness is higher than the price that you pay in ignorance. Okay? So the trap with this one, with the identity baiting, is that you begin to act from a need to remain consistent with an image of yourself rather than what you're actually discerning and going through. It becomes more important to prove who you are, right? And that is how harvesting can hide inside our own idea of self. our own self-concepts and our need to uphold them externally. And I want to be very specific with this. There's nothing wrong with having a self-concept that is rooted in your source code. But when you find yourself having to prove that externally, especially, there's a problem. Most of the time, if you feel you have to prove yourself in your source code to beings outside of you, it's going to then cause a feedback effect where then you're having to prove your self-concept to you, to yourself. And this is exactly why we are not supposed to be in exchanges with beings who are not in frequential alignment and see us for who we actually are. Because here's another truth. In your multidimensional, unlimited reality, you are all things. So what does that mean? That means you have the propensity to be all things. You have the propensity to choose to be all things. And when I say all things, I'm talking about the darkest of the dark, or the greatest expressions that are just like apart from I want to be careful here because darkness isn't bad, it's void energy, right? But having it out of balance means you are not allowing certain things to mature and come to the light, which is where they become exposed and come into fruition, right? So but you are able, let's not, get too far off track here. You are able to be and to express through the basest of frequencies and through the highest of frequencies, and people, based upon their own self-concept, perception, experience, contracts, what they're allowed to see based upon who they are able to perceive you in different ways too. People who are of a higher frequency tend to be able to see all things as they are. Not good, not bad, not wrong, not right, just as they are, without judgment, right? And we all, even high frequency beings, will judge at a certain point. I'm not saying there's perfection. I'm saying there's the propensity to do that first. Beings of a lower frequency, the lower you go in frequency, the more duality consciousness gets the better of you. So beings who dwell in lower frequencies are often only ever able to see things in opposition to one another that actually work together to bring harmonic resonance in the right balance. Okay? So beings who are unable to see you clearly because they're of a different frequency will often only be able to see certain aspects of you that might not even be what you're expressing, but it's based through the lens of what they're able to see on a frequential level. And if they are dwelling in lower frequencies and dimensions, and they are more subject to having their perception skewed by duality consciousness, they will always need to put you in the position of being an enemy or a villain to their perfection, which really is not perfection, but it's victimhood. A lot of the time, it's their need to stay being the person who is wronged, so they appear to be right, while casting other beings to be the protagonist that keep them being wronged. And I'm being so careful with my words here because a lot of this stuff is very real, because you guys know, like, if you resonate with me and you've been rolling with me for a while, this stuff is real. Like, the false matrix does design for us for certain beings, high frequency beings especially, to constantly be victimized while from every angle, while not being able to escape that, because other beings then cast them as being crazy or perpetual, like using those labels against them. That's real. But then there's also how some people use that identity to not break free. They come into agreement with the same victimhood loop that's been assigned them by the false matrix, but they flip it so that it has significance and divinity, which sometimes it does, but then they don't do the self-inventory to rise out of the very false identity that has them trapped. We're going to get into this a little bit more anyway, but it's coming up. Because the reality is that to all beings, you can be different things. In some beings' reality, I am a villain. And in some realities, I've earned that title. I haven't been perfect. I've been trying to find my way the fuck through this maze like everyone the fuck else. I haven't been perfect. I will never sit here and pretend like I have been. So in some people's reality, that's who I am, based upon their experience of me at a certain time, in a certain timeline, right? But then there are some beings who, because they don't want to take responsibility for their own shit, they want to just cast me in that role because it means that they temporarily don't have to deal with themselves. So this is where, again, proper awareness, responsibility, self-accountability, all of this is important for sovereignty. And it's also important, not only for sovereignty, it's important for discernment. Because if you're not aware of where you've legitimately been a villain, where you've been projected as being a villain, and who the fuck you actually are in the midst of all of that confusion, if you're not aware of that, then when people come into your field trying to make you a villain when you're not actually being a villain, they're just not dealing with themselves, then you can fall into the position of being something in someone else's reality because you've fallen for something that they've thrown your way and you haven't adhered to the truth of who you are. People will come to me and they will ask me, how is it that you're able to see certain things? How is it that I become more intuitive? I become more discerning? And the answer I have for people is annoying, just like the answer I have about protection. And that is that the more that you anchor into yourself, the more protected you are in source. The more that you're able to see yourself in all facets of the truth of who you are, the ugliest things to the most beautiful things, the more you are able to see the fact that whether you choose to or not, you have the propensity to be and to do all things, the more you are able to see other people clearly and you are able to properly discern energy as it enters into your reality, the easier it becomes to not allow other people to project their shit onto you while you own it as being your own. The more you know yourself, the more you can read the truth of what is happening energetically. This is why people who choose to continually project and not take responsibility, they actually are doing themselves a disservice because they are consenting to being blind. They are literally saying to their system, I don't want to see the truth of what is actually going on here because I can't handle seeing myself in a certain light. And so the system says, okay, let's shut that down. And you're not only shutting down that part, you're shutting down every single timeline, opportunity, everything that's connected to the light going on in that area. Number 9, we got there eventually. Reciprocity distortion. In these exchanges, something is technically being given back, but not in proportion of what is being taken energetically and in truth. So it is not enough to promote the true balance and restoration of what it's taking from. And so it therefore becomes extortion. And this again is where you have to know your own system and the expense of what it takes energetically for you to uphold it. Because when you do, you then begin to base access to you and how your own value system works in energy exchange in accordance with the truth of who you are, as opposed to what people feel comfortable doing to access you. The person may give kind words instead of invested action, admiration instead of accountability, promises instead of correction, symbolic gestures instead of real change, or emotional intensity instead of grounded reciprocity. This creates the illusion of mutuality while keeping the actual energetic burden uneven. And again, people think when they do this that they are getting away with something, but oftentimes they're not, especially if they're seeking to do this to a being who is coming higher into their own power and sovereignty. The price that they are trying to put on that being will ricochet back on them. Because at a certain point, when people rise in their power and their sovereignty, their system naturally will not deal with energies, entities, beings trying to come into their system wrongfully, with wrongful exchange. Because what that actually does is when you're taking from a system and you're not replenishing it or investing back in it, you are actually putting that system into collapse. And as a person rises higher into their power and their sovereignty, when you try to come into their system, at a certain point, they won't have to push you away anymore. Their own system will push you into collapse. So where you're trying to collapse them, whether you're aware of it unconsciously, where someone else is trying to collapse you, whether they're aware of it or not, your own system will collapse their attempt to collapse you. And this is exactly what the fuck I mean when I say that your highest protection is to be rooted in yourself and in your source code. And in, therefore, following what it is you need to do to maintain the proper maintenance and protection of that source code. Because when you do, your system begins to automatically push back at things that try to violate you. But you've got to teach your system this, because most of you who resonate with me, in truth, your systems have been purposely programmed into accepting other people's shit and collapsing on their behalf so that they can go on merrily in their lives doing what it is they need to do while you experience the downfall. Not anymore. Number 10, boundary testing by innocence or by feigning innocence. This is when someone, this is a really interesting one. This is when someone repeatedly oversteps in small ways. Each violation may be so small that it is easily dismissed as harmless, unintentional, accidental, understandable, or minor, or even, you have more tolerance for it because it's unconscious, right? Individually, each moment seems too small to confront or sometimes to even recognize and identify. But collectively, they add up to establish entitlement. The subtlety lies in the way that you're being trained to incrementally tolerate the violations while increasing access, because each single event feels too small to justify a firm response. But you feel it. You feel it, and then you talk yourself out of it because it's such a small thing and you shouldn't make a big deal out of it. Listen, if it's affecting you in any way, it's a big deal. Your loyalty is to your system, not to other people's distortion. And in correcting your own system, you give them the opportunity to correct theirs too, because sometimes people are doing these things and they're overreaching, and it truly is unconscious. And if they are self-aware beings, and you stand and grounded in your truth and in your boundaries to protect your own sacred ground, then you actually give them a mirror to see where it is that they are in violation of other people's energy, because they might really not be aware. We've all done this at some point. We have all overstepped in some way, right? So again, beings who want to be in source code, beings who want you to thrive in your source code, and they want themselves to be aware so they can thrive in their source code too. They want the correction, even if it doesn't feel good to the ego. I want the correction. I want to honestly see where I'm out of alignment in an energy exchange or a dynamic. I want to understand it so I can clear out that programming that had me living in that way unconsciously previously. It doesn't feel good to my ego. I've got to retreat into a dark corner and really deal with myself. But I would rather do that than continue giving to cycles of depletion. So, but people who specialize in this specific type of behavior, who don't want to take accountability, they will often accuse you of overreacting or making a big deal out of nothing when you call them out on their behaviors or assert a boundary to end the dynamic or quality of the exchange. And again, not everyone is coded to rise into golden age timelines. And sometimes it's not even that. Not everyone is coded to rise into certain frequencies at the same time as you. So oftentimes, sometimes beings are just fucking manipulative and they know what the fuck they're doing, and they're just trying to gauge how far they can push you subtly. Those motherfuckers exist. That's the truth. But when you're dealing with beings who honestly are blind to this, then a lot of the time they're not even able to see what it is, the pattern that you're showing. They're not able to see. They're not able to see what you see. And oftentimes you see the full chain reaction and ricochet and the effect that it's having on your timelines, the timelines that are connected to you. You're able to see so much past what it is that they're looking at, thinking it's just a minor thing. It's not a minor thing if it has a big effect on you. I'm going to say that again. It's not a minor thing if it has a big effect on you. And here's the thing about frequential alignment again. What is minor to them is probably minor to someone else in frequential alignment with them too. And that's why those birds of a feather should flock together. But if their minor thing is bringing collapse or distortion and discordance into your reality, it's not minor, and it needs to be respected for that. We all have different thresholds. We all have different abilities, different purposes. Our systems all work differently. This is why I keep on saying, people who are in frequential alignment with you, they will protect your source code. They will recognize that you are here to do something unique in your own blueprint, and therefore your system requires things that are different from theirs. So when you put up a boundary because you need to protect that, they are ready to come in and help you enforce that, even if it means that they have to deal with you differently, for as long as it doesn't put them into self-martyrdom or destruction within their own system. Then you're just not compatible. But people you're in frequential alignment with, the desire to protect one another's source code, it's real. Because in the protection of one another's source code, you protect your timelines, you protect their timelines, and you therefore protect the timelines on the earth. That's how deep it goes. Finally, number 11, victim position leverage. So, of course, not all victimhood is false. We talked about this before. Real harm does exist, and many who resonate with my work have been victimized repeatedly through the antics of the false matrix and her upholders, as have I. However, the harvesting begins when someone uses the fact of their pain to become exempt from reflection, accountability, personal responsibility, reciprocity, or restraint. At that point, the wound is no longer just a wound, but a source of leverage. Their suffering becomes the reason why they are not to be challenged, why they are not to carry what you're carrying, why they are not to be disappointed, not to be limited, not to be left, not to be said no to, and not to be asked to stand in responsibility. This is when pain becomes a harvesting device through the weaponizing of former trauma and victimhood. Okay? Subtle harvesting recruits the best parts of us, not the worst, the best. It feeds on and weaponizes our compassion, our kindness, our patience, our forgiveness, our spiritual sincerity, our pattern recognition, and the real desire that we have to see others rise. But we are not here to be extorted. People are here to rise with us in their own strength, not to hang on to our coattails and hold us back so they can falsely rise through us, instead of by their own source code and the efforts it takes on their own behalves to recover it. That is why real discernment matters so much, because without this discernment, our virtues become unsecured opening and we give unauthorized access. Yeshua said that you will know them by their fruit. And this is something I've become so much more aware of recently. He didn't say that you would know them by their words or even by their behaviors and actions. He said you would know them by their fruit. So if you really want to understand and overstand how an energy is moving in any exchange, look for the fruit that it's producing through its cycles and patterns. Because the fruit, the tree can only produce what the foundation is or what is running through the cycles. An orange tree cannot produce apples, and misaligned connections cannot produce organic timelines. Misaligned connections cannot produce anything that actually grows you in your source code outside of the suffering that it brings through misalignment that then forces you to see things. But that's not the design for source and our relationships. We are actually not here to learn by suffering. Suffering is something we fall into because we're misaligned. So suffering is the fruit of misalignment, and our own systems allow us to produce that fruit for the very purpose of seeing that we're in misalignment. When we are in proper frequential alignment, the fruit we produce is what they call in the Bible the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And self-control isn't withholding. It's not self-control is being able to take accountability and responsibility for self. That's what self-control actually, if you go back to the actual original translation, I actually haven't looked at that, especially not in a while, but I'm betting that if you go back to the original translation, it's more along the lines of preservation of your preservation and responsibility for what it is you do, as opposed to like abstinence. I'm not talking about the self-control where we think of abstinence. No. But the point is with the fruit, right? Energy don't lie. Energy don't lie. It can only produce what is true of the energy. So if you are in a connection and it produces nothing but cycles of pain, frustration, lack, it's not a personal thing. The person might be really nice. You might be really nice. You both might have really high intentions. It's not personal, it's energetic. And energy don't lie. Because what is really at play, energetically speaking, will always show itself through the fruit that the cycle produces. Does the relationship or alliance produce mutual correction, deeper clarity, and increased coherence in your source code and truth? Or does it produce needless repetition, depletion, lack of clarity, and a constant need for explanation? Explaining yourself, explaining why it is you do what you do, constantly needing to explain and prove the validity of your choices and who you are. That's fucking exhausting because it's misalignment. The fruit of the exchange shows the true energy and dynamic behind the exchange. The patterning will always expose what others may seek to hide behind words and intentions. Harvesting is not about overt domination, but about unauthorized dependency born from covert coercion and manipulation. Whether that coercion and manipulation is nefarious in nature, unconscious, unintentional, it doesn't matter, because the fruit it produces is detrimental to your cycles, their cycles, and the earth. So, harvesting is not about overt domination, but about unauthorized dependency born from coercion and manipulation. Covertly so. This is when someone begins sourcing from your field what they are meant to cultivate for themselves. They are depending on your connection to source instead of forging and solidifying their own. In other words, they are unwittingly putting you in the position of being God over them. And in doing so, stealing from their own ability and selves to be truly sovereign, and also stealing from you. It's thievery both ways. Because we all have the ability to have that direct connection to source when we are rooted in ourselves and our source code. We don't need to be taking from others for our stability or for any other reason. We're not here to be alone. I want to say that very vehemently also, because when I talk about this kind of stuff, it can then produce this idea that you're supposed to be like completely independent. No, we're supposed to be interdependent. And this is why this message is coming through now the way it is, because so many of you've been in hermit mode for so long. And now it's time for you to begin to move into energy exchanges and into dynamics where your source code is protected, where other beings' source code is protected in communion with you. And this is why these messages are coming through. Not because you're supposed to be an island unto yourself and lock everyone else out, but because you're here to be discerning and to realize your own value and to uphold whatever it takes for that value to grow and expand in truth and in spirit. And you can't do that with beings who are consistently taking from you, depleting you, who see your value but don't know how to look after it. So many people, and I think I spoke about this on the community board, many people will see your value. Not everyone will know how to bring it into true appreciation and expansion. It's like being able to go and see a beautiful piece of fertile land and seeing how all the crops grow and loving that piece of land for what it produces and enjoying of the fruit, but not knowing how to properly till the land so the fruit keeps coming. We are not to be with people who keep on stealing our good fruit to gorge themselves with it and leaving us unable to continue to produce in accordance with what we're here to produce for. Our fruit is here to be enjoyed, but we are also here to be replenished so that we can continue to bring forth that fruit. A source encoded being who is in frequential alignment with you sees the beauty of your fruit and wants to continue in relationship so they can further cultivate that in truth. Not in intention, but in truth. So when others are depending on your connection to source, instead of building their own and fortifying their own connection, because a lot of the time they think they're not, they have these lies that run through their consciousness that are, it's false matrix programming, that they're not as gifted, they're not as close, they're not as resourced. That's not true. That's not true. Once upon a time, all of us were completely unaware of all of this stuff. It's not that some people all of a sudden just wake up and are, they're blessed. That's not how the fuck it happens. Every single thing that I come on here and I share and have shared for years has been through consistent self-study, studying of energy, and going through a fuck ton of shit that I've had to clear out in order to see the things I see. A light bulb didn't just go off. It was through sheer determination. And so for people to come and act as if they can't do that too, it's not true. It's not true. That's false matrix programming. And worse still, for people to come and think they have a right to what it is I have to give because to them it looks like it came from nowhere. You really have no fucking idea how this shit works then. If you think of being like me, sharing this caliber of information that I share with people is born just from me waking up and being, or being more blessed and highly favored than you, then I don't know. I don't know like what you're plugged into, because that's not how it works. We all have different purposes, different things we're here to do, right? I don't believe in all of this thing, this person's a higher right. No, we just have different purposes. And you best believe that the more you're here to go ahead and to turn things back on and turn the false matrix off and be able to share this kind of stuff that I share with you guys, you best believe that the density I have to push past is going to be greater than what it is for most people, because I am here to do that so that it is easier for other beings. And I need to be able to do that without being extorted, because it's fucking hard enough. You know? And so I'm saying that because I can only use myself as an example. I don't need to align myself with beings who pull me down, not even the smallest amount, because of where we are in ascension and because of what that means, because of what it is I'm here to do. And I'm not the only one. If I'm speaking to you and you resonate with my work, I'm not the only one. I can speak to you here about it, but I'm not the only one. And this is why I say I'm grateful for people who have eyes to see who I truly am. And when I have the ability to have eyes to see who people truly are in their value, I appreciate that. Because the false matrix taught us to treat people like they're expendable and like they're commodities and like they're here for our use in some way without ever thinking about the cost on their end. And that's not the new earth. Those are not the golden age timelines. And those of us who profess to be source encoded and high frequency beings are here to bring the truth that sustains the integrity of source code on the planet. We're here to bring it back. But it's not just going to come here willy-nilly. It comes through our choice. Just like the false matrix was born through our choice. So when people are depending on your connection to source, they may be using your steadiness for their regulation, your wisdom for direction. Now, there's nothing wrong with using someone else's wisdom for direction for as long as you're not putting them in the position of God and you're actually just appreciating their wisdom for helping to expand your own direction you have for yourself. And there's a difference, right? So they may use your steadiness for their regulation, your wisdom wrongfully for their direction, your life force for their propulsion, your softness for their relief, and your capacity for their expansion. And if this is not corrected, the relationship ceases to be an exchange and it instead becomes an extraction system that takes wrongfully from you. And it also robs them of the ability to see this or to connect with what it is they're doing in order to properly replenish. And this is a big problem. And this is why I talk about it so passionately, because the false matrix installed that psyop and program into the work of true healers. This is why healers on this planet have been so disrespected. Their time has been disrespected. Their value has been disrespected. Their gifts have been disrespected. They're treated as if they're just supposed to give everything to everyone for free. And who the fuck knows how they are supposed to sustain themselves? It's something that has been taught through false matrix programming, and we have to break it. Because the beings that are here to bring back the golden age timelines are exactly the ones who need to be invested into. How the fuck are we going to have a true new earth economy if the very ones that are here to bring it forth, the energy exchanges around that are wrong? Then we're creating foundationally something that's fucked up again. So a lot of this, again, it's unconscious. It's programming. We're all guilty of doing it. We're guilty of doing it to ourselves. Those of you who are healers, who are people who are here to be forerunners energetically in opening things up for the rest of the collective, you've done it to yourself. I've done it to myself. We've underestimated and undervalued ourselves based upon the programming that we're supposed to just give. We've all done it. We've all, again, like I said before, we have to take responsibility for where we've actually kept these false matrix programs and cycles alive. Because only when we take responsibility can we bring an end to it. So while a lot of this is unconscious, it is still harmful. It's harmful to latch on to other people and to subtly manipulate them. It weakens them. It steals from their timelines. It even can make them sick because it introduces wrongful death. Wrongful death. And I'm not just talking about death of the body. If you know what death does energetically, we talk about all the time death magic. It's all the same thing. It's energy. So people who are stealing from other beings are introducing what we would call death magic into their realities, oftentimes while complaining about the death magic and cycles that they're being targeted with too. It's crazy, right? But we have to see it for what it is. We have to see it for what it is so we all stop. Because when we are moving in misalignment, we are introducing wrongful timing. We are allowing things to live past their point of expiration. We are allowing things to die that are supposed to blossom and bloom. This is why it's dangerous. Yeshua, bring Yeshua back into this, because Yeshua was one of the biggest scapegoats of our time, whose story was distorted and inverted to energy harvest, to create even more energy harvesting opportunities and to energy harvest from him too, and his memory on the earth. Because he didn't come here to save us from our sins. If you're a sovereign being, you are here to save yourself from your misalignment, not anyone else, not God, not Yeshua, not Source. You were given the gift of the sovereignty and the trust to use that properly. Yeshua said that the wages of sin, quote unquote, is death. Sin is not being bad. Sin is misalignment that produces uneven energy exchanges, which then introduces wrongful death and destruction into our cycles, where source-coded life should flourish and bloom. And this then extends life to that which is parasitic and extractive in nature. And that pulls things out of true harmony and order, making energy harvesting an inevitability. Let that sit with you for a minute and really think on it. Not think on it, meditate on it. The wages of sin is death. There's a price to be paid when we move out of alignment. There's a price to be paid when we move out of alignment. There's a sacrifice that comes. And this is why your own system will introduce suffering so that you align yourself again. That's the only mechanism that Source introduced to help us be in alignment. We're not pulled into situations and we're not controlled. When you feel like you're being controlled or spirit won't let me do, no. That's not spirit, that's not Source. Oftentimes that's something of our own programming based upon religious templates where we were, told even in spiritual circles that there are things outside of us that are here to guide us and control us in certain ways. It's not true. It's not true. Sometimes we create those things because we need that to a certain extent. I'm not knocking it, but I am saying that any time we're sitting here and we're like, this thing told me I can't, no. So in conclusion, because it's been a long fucking video, subtle harvesting often enters through mimicry, need, flattery, guilt, confusion, crisis, and social programming. It sustains itself by exploitation of your empathy, your self-doubt, your moral code, your hopes, fears, and desires. It reveals itself through the fruit of the cycle and the patterning. So with subtle energy harvesting, the fruit will often be depletion, fog, resentment, illness, overextension, bitterness, repetition, and loss of creative flow and life force. It ends when access and agreement are no longer granted. And in closing, boundaries, for those of you who feel bad about protecting your beauty and your value and your sacredness, because you've been made to feel that way for other beings who have consistent access to you wrongfully. Boundaries do not create distortion or dysfunction. True boundaries will reveal where the discord and dysfunction has been hiding. A truly clean exchange can withstand a boundary. A harvesting dynamic cannot. This is why the reaction to a boundary placed is so diagnostic in nature, because it shows whether the connection was truly built on real respect or on the access that was being allowed through proximity. Okay? I know it's been a fucking long video. Like I said, I needed to give this the justice it deserved. If you're still hanging out with me, thank you so much for being here. What else? I will have a decree that I've already written. I just need to get it out. It is all about, it's based upon this energy. It's about taking back your life force, your consent, any unconscious agreement you've made in these exchanges, because we all did, through the false matrix. It's about exposing those areas where those agreements and relationships and energies are still lurking through our exchanges with other beings and also within ourselves. And it's also about taking back the full mantle of your source encoded identity, because I had a beautiful client a few days ago. I think I had her on Friday, who was asking me if I had a decree very specifically on coming into the fullness of your source encoded identity. And I said to her, actually, that's a really great idea, considering that it's Aries season, and that's one of the main themes and the main ways that Aries energy helps us. So I have included that. This is also about like source encoded identity reclamation. That's part of this decree too. It's a very long decree. It's very thorough. It's like 14 pages. But every area where I felt like I needed to touch and nip this thing in the bud, I think I did so. So if that decree is not up at the time that this video is published, please stay alert to the community board. I will let you know when it is available. I will post the link and the information concerning that on the community board. And I will also, my next video, I'll let you know too. Okay, so stay in tune, because I'm feeling like I might just want to do a group on Sunday. And if I do, you'll have all information on that and how to join on Wednesday, the 1st of April. Okay, so I think that's it. If you would like to give to my work, if you would like to give to the value that you get from my existence, you can do so through my Ko-Fi. If you would like to buy me just a cup of coffee, you can do so through my Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/Solarah Rises. I'll put the information in the description box below. All of my other decrees are also available in my Ko-Fi shop. If you would like to book for a 60 or 90-minute soul recovery session, you can do so through my Ko-Fi shop too. If you would like specifically to book me for a divine alignment reading, you can do so by emailing me, solarahspeaks@proton.me. Okay, I think that's it. Oh, if you'd like a bespoke decree, a decree written just for you, for your situation or scenario, you can also find that information at my Ko-Fi shop. I'll put all of this in the first pinned comment in the section below. But I will see you when I see you. I do have I have more downloads to share, But today being the last 3-3 portal of the year, it just felt like as this message came through, it was really important to get it out today. And then I will backtrack to some of the other downloads I got, which funnily enough, when I was thinking of, should I do this message later and the other one that came first, what came through was very clear that I should do this one first because of the timing of it, and because the message that I'm going to record of the other downloads, this one is actually going to work very powerfully as a foundation for that, for those beings who resonate with that. I can tell you, let me tell you what the name of that is so that you know ahead of time. Oh boy. I just... Oh, I've got 2 more messages, but the one that, okay, you lost 10 years of your life because of this. That's the message that was coming through. This came through on Saturday. You lost 10 years of your life because of this, but those years will be restored with compound interest for what was taken. Your time and timelines weren't truly lost, but rerouted. So I feel like some awareness of how some of this stuff has played out is coming through with what it was I shared here. So anyway, I will see you guys when I see you. Until then, be well.